It is a little after 6 on a July morning in 1954, on a street of two-story wooden houses in the Warsaw district of Slavic Village, on Cleveland's southeast side, and a woman is already moving through her house the way a ship's mate moves through rigging. She raises the bottom sash in the front rooms and lowers the top sash an inch, then she crosses to the back and does the opposite, so the house will pull the cool night air through low and push yesterday's heat out high before the sun clears the rooftops. She has maybe 2 hours before she has to shut it all again. For blocks away, in a fourth-floor brick walk-up on Scranton Avenue, Edna Novak, 44, has no such moves to make. Her flat has windows on one wall only, there is no far side to open, no draft to pull. By 9 it will already be an oven, and it will stay one until long after dark. 2 women, the same July, the same city, and 2 completely different machines to fight the heat with. One house could breathe. The other could not. The question that runs under everything that follows is a simple one, and it is not really about weather at all. Why could one house breathe, and the other could not? A house built before air conditioning was a machine, and its engine was the plainest fact in physics. Warm air rises. Ceilings in a decent frame house or a city row house ran to 10 feet. A 10-foot ceiling had become the norm, one architectural historian noted, and not for grandeur alone. The height let the hottest air stratify well above where people actually sat and slept. Above every interior door sat a transom, a small hinged window that let that risen heat travel from room to room and up the stairwell even when the doors were shut for privacy. The double-hung sash window was the control panel. Open the bottom on the breezy side to draw cool air in low, open the top on the far side to let hot air spill out high, and the whole house turned into a chimney drawing itself cool. Outside, canvas awnings and a shade tree did the coarse work of stopping the sun before it ever reached the glass. The U.S. Department of Energy still measures it. Window awnings can reduce solar heat gain in summer by up to 65% on south-facing windows and 77% on west-facing windows. None of it burned a watt of power. All of it required a person who knew the sequence. CTA number 1, if your family kept a house like this, if you remember the transom over a bedroom door, the sleeping porch out back, or the awnings that came down every June, tell us what you remember, because this knowledge was never printed in any manual, it lived in the people who ran the house. Next time we go down to the corner drugstore for the 5-cent cold a working family could buy when the house finally gave out. But knowing the parts is not the same as running them. So how did a family actually work this machine across a single hot day? The day had a choreography, and it began before dawn. Overnight the windows and the transoms stood open and the house drank the cool air. By 8 or 9, when the outside temperature climbed to meet the inside, you closed the house up tight and pulled the shades on the sunny side, trapping the cool you had banked overnight. People who lived this way describe watching a porch thermometer and shutting the windows at the exact moment the outdoor reading caught up to the indoor one. The awnings came down over the east windows first, then shifted to the west as the afternoon turned. Drapes were drawn against the hard afternoon light, because the old rule was blunt and correct, light is heat. Cooking got pushed to the cool ends of the day or out to a back summer kitchen, so the hot range would not undo the morning's work. Then, in the evening, the whole sequence ran in reverse, shades up, sashes thrown open top and bottom, and if the family had one, the whole house fan roaring in the attic hall, pulling the night in through every open window at once. A well-run house could hold a good 15 degrees below the street. A badly run house, or one nobody had ever taught, was just a hot box with nice trim. All of which raises the harder question, what happened to even the best-run house when the heat simply would not break at night? There is a limit, and every family that lived this way knew it in their bones. The breathing house works by flushing out the day's heat with cool night air. In a heat wave, the night never cools, the low stays in the 80s, the humidity sits on the city like a wet blanket, and there is simply nothing cool to pull in. The house has no reset. In July 1936, in the worst heat wave in the nation's recorded history, more than 5,000 Americans died. The U.S. Department of Commerce's own mortality statistics for 1936 counted 4,678 deaths attributed to excessive heat that year, against 728 the year before. New York City hit 106 degrees on the 9th of July, and interior rooms with no cross-ventilation were measured at 120. Even a 10-foot ceiling and a perfectly worked transom only buy you a few degrees, not deliverance, when the air outside is hotter than blood. This is the honest center of the story. These houses were genuinely ingenious, and they were not enough. The people who ended up sleeping on the porch, on the fire escape, on the flat roof, or out in the park were not being quaint. They had run out of house. And that failure did not fall on everyone equally, which forces the next question: who got the house that could breathe at all, and who got the airless room on the top floor? Not every family got a machine built to breathe. The two-story frame house, with its transoms, its deep porch, its shade tree, belonged, broadly, to people who could buy or rent a whole house on a lot of their own. The airless walk-up flat, with windows on one wall, no cross-draft, and a kitchen that held the day's heat past midnight, belonged to those who could not. In New York, 2 of every 3 residents lived in tenements, and the reformers who forced air shafts and interior windows into those buildings under the 1901 Tenement House Act were fighting exactly this problem: rooms with no way to move air at all. The cheap end of the housing stock, the back tenement, the kitchenette carved out of a subdivided row house, the top floor flat baking under the roof, was precisely the housing that could not perform the trick this whole story describes. Edna Novak's 4th floor walk-up was not a design failure. It was a design decision, made by someone who would never have to live in it. So the porch and the transom were never just charming features, they were a dividing line between who could cool a home for free and who could not. And in the American city, that line was drawn, quite literally, on a map. In the 1930s, the Federal Home Owners Loan Corporation graded American neighborhoods for mortgage lending: green for best, red for hazardous, and the red lines fell, overwhelmingly, on black and immigrant working-class districts. That map did far more than deny loans. It shaped where trees were planted, where houses were maintained, and where heat would pool for the next century. A 2020 study of 108 cities by Jeremy Hoffman, Vivek Chandas, and Nicholas Pendleton, published in the journal Climate, found that land surface temperatures in red-lined areas run approximately 2.6 degrees Celsius, nearly 5 degrees Fahrenheit, warmer than in non-red-lined areas, a pattern that held in 94% of the cities studied. Belt magazine reported that in Cleveland the gap between red-lined districts and green-rated suburbs like Shaker Heights and Rocky River was almost exactly that, nearly 5 degrees. A 2021 study in NPJ Urban Sustainability by Dexter Locke and colleagues found that formerly Grade D neighborhoods carry, on average, about 23% tree canopy today, against about 43% in formerly Grade A ones, nearly double the shade. The families with the breathing houses and the street trees were, disproportionately, the families the map had blessed. The heat was never only weather. So what did those who did have the breathing house actually do with it, in the long evening after the machine had done its work? When the house was shut against the afternoon and the family had nowhere cool to be, they went out to the porch. The front porch was the coolest shaded seat in the neighborhood before 6 o'clock, and by evening the whole street was out on theirs, which is how the porch became America's open-air parlor, not out of sentiment but out of thermodynamics. Upstairs, families who had built one moved out to the sleeping porch, a screened room off a back bedroom that had spread across American houses between 1900 and the 1920s, half for the summer breeze and half from the fresh air gospel of the tuberculosis years, when doctors prescribed cool night air as medicine. For those with no porch at all, there was the fire escape, the summer porches of the poor, as one New York chronicler called them, where families dragged mattresses out onto the iron grating and slept above the street, sometimes fined by housing inspectors for blocking the escape, and sometimes, tragically, falling. The stoop, the porch, and the fire escape were the same human instinct expressed at 3 different price points. And when even the porch failed to give any relief, a working family went looking for coal it could rent by the hour. The coal you could buy was down the streetcar line. In 1925, Willis Carrier installed a chiller in the Rivoli Theater in Times Square, and by 1930, according to Carrier's own history, more than 300 theaters hung banners from their marquees advertising, "Cooled by refrigeration." For a generation, the movie house became the most reliably cold room a working person could enter for the price of a ticket. Edna Novak's cold room was the Lowe's State on Euclid Avenue, 35 cents, the air conditioning running since the 15th of May, and her Tuesday nights there were not entertainment so much as relief with a plot attached. The department stores learned the same lesson and chilled their main floors to pull crowds in off the burning pavement. And every day, whatever the weather, the Iceman climbed Edna's 4 flights with a block held in his tongs, reading the printed card she set in the window, 25, 50, to know how many pounds to carry up. Rented cold, borrowed cold, block cold hauled up a stairwell 1 dripping load at a time, that was how you survived the hours the house could not cover. But the cold that would finally end all of this did not arrive at a theater. It arrived, 1 window at a time, on the houses themselves. Here is the thing the histories usually miss: the breathing house was not automatic, and the person running it was a skilled operator. Everything I have described, the sequence of sashes at dawn, the shutting up at 9, the awnings tracking the sun across the day, the drawn drapes, the attic fan, the retreat to the porch and back, was a craft, held in the body, learned by watching a mother or a grandmother do it, and never once written down. It was the kind of knowledge that carries no diploma and files no patent, so when it disappeared, it left no record but the houses themselves, standing there with their transoms and their empty awning brackets like the controls of a machine nobody remembers how to fly. The woman moving through her rooms at 6 in the morning was not doing chores. She was operating climate control with her hands and her judgment, reading the sky and the thermometer in the direction of the breeze, and she was genuinely good at it. That competence, unpaid, unrecorded, real, is exactly the thing the private cold would make unnecessary. Which is precisely what happened next, household by household, on a single ordinary street. It came in through the window. In August 1953, Edna Novak's neighbor Mrs. Kowalski set a Westinghouse unit in her front window, and by October Edna's husband had the Sears catalog open to the page where the machine cost $289 against his $78 a week. The Novaks financed their own in June 1956. Now multiply that by a street, a city, a country. In 1953 alone, 1 million air conditioners were sold. Fewer than 2% of American homes had air conditioning in 1955, but by 1960 the census counted about 12%, and by 1980, 57%. And as the cold came in, the house went quiet. The post-war ranch house was built for it. Central air, as one architectural survey put it flatly, removed the need for a front porch in favor of a small concrete stoop. Porch construction fell away, the sleeping porch was glassed in or forgotten, awnings wore out and were not replaced, transoms were painted shut for privacy, because no one needed them to breathe anymore. The improvement was real, no one who lived through 1936 would pretend otherwise, and the private cold saved lives. But something specific ended. The heat had been shared, out on the stoops and the porches and the fire escapes. The cold was private, one household at a time, behind a sealed window. CTA number 2, if you remember a transom over a door, a sleeping porch out back, or the crank of an awning coming down, tell us what you remember, and tell us about the summer it all got sealed shut, because when this knowledge went, it went quietly, and the houses cannot tell you themselves. The breathing house asked something of the people who lived in it, the sealed house asked nothing, and gave nothing back but cold. Edna Novak's daughter stayed inside on a Tuesday evening in July 1963. The Lowe's State on Euclid Avenue would close in 1969.